This is a No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Matt.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Lisa. And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is season 4, episode 5, and we are continuing our series on new media horror.
So we are joined today by a special guest and an expert on the topic for this episode. And so before we
expert is such a strong word.
Well, connoisseur, how's that?
Yeah, that's it.
So I would like to introduce a good friend of mine. This is Nekko, who is going to join us for a nice conversation about kind of the intersection between horror and video games. So I guess let's just start off with, like, what was your first horror video game and why do you... Okay, these are two very different, complicated questions, but what was your first one and why do you like the genre so much in the video game form?
The game question's not that hard because I actually just addressed that. I've been doing a blog this month because it's Halloween. I always do a blog every month. I mean, for all Halloween. But anyway, it was D. That is the name of the game. D was my first horror video game. It is a game that came out on Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1, and it is a 2-hour time slog of... It is a very bizarre game. That's the best way to put it. It's really hard to explain that game.
Okay, so what is it about the horror genre in video game form? Like, what do you think? Why do you like it so much? Because I have my own answer, but like, I think this will be a good place to just kind of generate some conversation.
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess it kind of stems back to the whole, like, I got into horror reading it. Like, I started out with the what's the name of them? God, brain, work with me here. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. That was like my introduction to like things that just squeaked me out. And I just looked for it everywhere I could. And then I got a Saturn for Christmas one year. And then there was the commercial for Resident Evil. It's like, oh my God, they make video games for this too? Yeah, that's pretty much what got me. And I've just been hooked ever since. It's that extra little bit of control in it. Because that's the whole point of horror for me, is that it's controlled fear. It's something you can control, but it still scares you. Kind of like riding roller coasters, except I don't ride roller coasters because I'm scared of heights.
Understandable. I used to love roller coasters, and then I got older, and now my back would probably kill me if I tried to do it. But yeah, I like that idea of controlled fear, giving you like a safe place to experience the thrills and everything of fear and horror, but not actually living it.
Yeah, there's no real risk to it, and that's what I like about it. You still get the adrenaline rush, but there's no actual danger for you involved with it.
Well, and for me, I'd almost say it's like I like that idea, and I hadn't thought to put it that way. I'd add, for me at least personally, I love the immersion of it as well.
That's part of it. That's part of the control, is that the video game takes you a step further than a movie can. The movie, you're watching other people do stupid stuff. The video game asks you to do the stupid stuff.
Exactly. I still remember, like, for me, my first horror video game experience was, you mentioned Resident Evil. It was Resident Evil. I was spending the night at a friend's house, and we rented Resident Evil, the first one, from Blockbuster Video, and we stayed up all night playing it. Partly because we started out and we were really hooked on it, and then it got to a point where we were just so freaked out that we just couldn't go to sleep. So
yeah, I had a similar experience with Resident Evil, because see, I wanted Resident Evil when it came out, but they didn't have it. And my parents were like, well, pick something different, and that's how I ended up with D. Now, so I'm going to spoil D a little bit, because D is like over 20 years old, and if you haven't played it, trust me, you don't want to, because it hasn't aged well. The director of D was going insane. That's the best way to put it. The guy was going insane. He is since passed, I think. But yeah, he's made several games, but he was going nuts. It's kind of like the Horla effect, basically. Like when he wrote the Horla, he was going nuts. That's what was happening with this. He wanted to make a TV show styled video game where he created a digital actress. So it's really weird like that. But basically, you're playing this girl named Laura. Her dad is a doctor at this hospital, and he's gone bonkers, and he has murdered everybody inside of it. And she goes inside his brain, and it just proceeds to get weirder from there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's on a time limit, though. It's got a 2-hour time limit. Nothing really hurts you in it, but it's that horror theme park ride thing that happens. It's filled with puzzles. It's really neat. It's just it hasn't aged well, and unless you're into retro games, I would not suggest trying it. But you can find it on good old games if you're looking for it.
Well, I mean, kind of getting ready for this podcast episode, I was also trying to think of just like scary video game moments for me, because I think one thing that I think we can overlook is that not all scary video games have to be horror, and I say this because we used to play Minecraft together way back in the day on
Creepers, man. Creepers still gives me PTSD.
Exactly. Like I remember there was one night I'd been playing Minecraft way too late, and I had headphones on, and I was running around, and it was dark, and then I hear this, and I about jumped out of my seat.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I think you were there that night. I had that experience too. Me and our buddy Scrawny, and they were showing me around the server, and a creeper spawned 2 feet behind me, and I had enough time to curse and move. And he didn't.
Yes. So, and I think that's, I mean, definitely we're talking about that. It doesn't have to be a horror themed game to have its scary moments, for sure.
No, some of the weirder moments I've had in video games aren't in horror movies. I mean, in horror games.
Well, do tell. Like you broached the subject.
See, I'm trying to think of several of them. Like, I just recently played Control, so that's like just in my head right now. That one is kind of like X-Files, the video game. Mix a little bit of Twin Peaks. It's just super, like, you're basically going through an area and there's just all this weird stuff in this place. But the atmosphere, like, the game itself is not a horror game. It's classified as adventure. But, like, there are people that have been possessed by this alien force, and they're just like floating in the sky above you and stuff. But like, you'll run across things like there's a room where there's a refrigerator, and there's a guy sitting in front of the refrigerator just staring at it, and he's begging you to go find somebody else to come stare at this refrigerator before it kills him. And you're just like, wait, what? It's stuff like that. It's just like, okay, that's just generally unnerving. Near Automata is another one where it's got a lot of really tense things in it, even though it's not a scary game. It's an adventure game. There's, for lack of a better term, a robot orgy at one point in that game, and then a creature is born from that basically just proceeds to whoop your butt. And it's just that whole unnervingness of watching things act like humans that aren't human. It just bothers you because it's not supposed to work like that.
Well, and did you ever play the Max Payne series?
I did not.
Because there's...
I've heard there's some good scenes in that too.
There are, and there's... I think it was the second one. They kind of blend together because I played them both back to back years ago. But I think it was the second one where there's a couple of stages where you're basically running through his like PTSD nightmare, and it's like... It's straight horror show kind of stuff. Like you're hearing his murdered wife screaming and a baby crying as you're running around in the dark following this blood trail. I'm like, it's crazy, and it's definitely one of those things that gets under your skin.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's a trope that a lot of video games like to do. So we're gonna put you inside of somebody's crazy thoughts. Oh, the Batman games, the newer Batman games like Batman Arkham Knight and Asylum, and those. I haven't played Asylum yet. I mean, Knight yet, but I've played Asylum and City, and they have segments where you run into Scarecrow's brain, like he's trapped you, and those are legit like weird and kind of unnerving because it's inside of Batman's head, and then it's just a giant Scarecrow doing stuff to you.
Well, I mean,
It's
I'm sure it's perfectly, fun and pleasant, right? Just
oh
about
yeah,
being
yeah.
fun.
I mean, it's great for me. That's the stuff I live for. Sure, Batman wasn't amused.
Well, I'm certain of that. Well, I guess.
I don't really have the experience with playing horror video games that you guys do, but I have played video games. There's been a big gap. I played them mainly when I was younger, but I remember a couple games that I've played that had what were kind of scary moments or horror moments within them. One was when I guess it would have been the 90s. We had a PC and I played games like The Secret of Monkey Island and various other games where you would like point and click and the character would do something and you would like solve puzzles and go through this narrative. And I played all the ones about Indiana Jones that I could get. And there was one where he was trying to stop the Nazis, of course, from getting the powers of Atlantis. And it had this really creepy scene at the end where the Nazis get their comeuppance, like when they open the Lost Ark. And I've also played several Star Trek video games. And I remember when I was playing the Star Trek Voyager video game, uh, the moment where you have to infiltrate the Borg cube and like walk around very quietly while the Borg drones are around and hope that they don't see you and attack you, and then you have to like run and they're adapting and all that. That was kind of creepy. And then there was a scene with the Star Trek Voyager aliens, the Hirogen, which are kind of like they're kind of like the Reavers, I guess, from Firefly. And if you're not careful, they start tracking you to kill you. And there was this moment all the time when they would like call you on the communicator or something would come over the PA system or whatever, like they were tracking you. And then pretty much I knew I was going to die. But those kind of weird, they weren't horror games per se, but they were kind of like these creepy horror aspects from whatever show or whatever franchise had the game. So yeah, I can't speak to playing a game that was all horror, but I do understand that idea of like getting sucked into someone's creepy brain or being prey or chased by something in that respect.
In the same aspect, a lot of those things you mentioned are the foundations of a lot of the modern horror games that come out now. I like to call them run and jump scare games because I don't particularly like them myself. I like being able to fight back in my games, but like there you have the Outlast, you have Alien Isolation that are based off it's based off the Alien movie, so of course you can't really fight back with a xenomorph. And that's the whole premise of those games is not getting caught. And there's something about not getting caught. You find out even when you're a kid just playing hide and seek that's tense. And that tension is what is the horror of that situation.
Well, and I haven't played them myself, so I'm running on secondhand knowledge here, but the kids have, the kids that I live with, my stepkids, and I think my daughter too, they got really into Five Nights at Freddy's, and that's basically another Outlast kind of thing, if I'm not mistaken.
That's another one of those hide and jump scare kind of things. I like the concept of Five Nights at Freddy's, but it's not a game that's made for me. But at the same time, the whole story behind how that game even got made is just interesting. Which
Okay,
for those that,
like that.
I mean, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I had to swallow. Okay. All right. So for those that don't understand the making of Five Nights at Freddy's, the guy Scott that makes the Five Nights at Freddy games, because it's just one guy that makes them. I mean, mind you, he's got voice actors and stuff now. He was an indie developer that made like kid-friendly Christian games kind of stuff, but he would make these animatronics and nobody liked his games, and a lot of people kept pointing out how his animatronics just looked really messed up, like they're creepy in their own right. Like if you've seen the more cartoony looking versions of Freddy and stuff, like that's how his normal characters looked. So he got tired of everybody saying that about that stuff and went, you know what, if you want scary, I'm going to show you scary. And then he just proceeded to make Five Nights at Freddy, which, I mean, he tapped into a unspoken fear I think anybody from the 80s and early 90s kids group can understand with animatronics, because, you know, Chuck E. Cheese and stuff like that, like those things are creepy.
They are.
They definitely are, yeah.
Like, you know, and the McDonald's mascots, like those are creepy.
I definitely remember going to Chuck E. Cheese as a very young kid, and not quite understanding the appeal of the animatronics. Like all they did was scare me.
I still don't get it. Like it had to have been adults that thought that was cool because there's no child on the face of the earth that thought those things were okay.
Right? Well,
and if they did, they're probably a serial killer now. I'm saying that.
Going on record.
Yes, that is on record.
I always like to tell this as a follow-up anytime I mention Chuck E. Cheese in casual conversation. The Chuck E. Cheese in the town where I grew up, it closed down when I was about 5 or 6, and a few years later, the building was vacant for a while, and what opened up was the regional IRS headquarters in its place. So I find it hilarious that it's like this kids entertainment arcade and terrible pizza turning into the IRS.
Somehow it's fitting. Somehow it makes some sort of strange sense that it happened like that.
That's what I've always thought, at least.
You've grown up and we'll take your money one way or the other, kid.
So I have to ask, like, we've talked about the horror video games and your first one. What's your favorite one? Like, I know.
Ooh, that's a tough question.
That's it. Yeah, we come with the hard questions here.
That is a hard one. It's like it's a toss up. Like honestly, like my favorite series is Silent Hill, but my favorite game, that's because I'm the kind of person that I don't really have favorites. I have things that I love, and it may change from day to day what I consider my favorite, with one exception, because like I've just recently decided what my favorite video game of all time is. That's Nier Automata. That's a discussion for another day. Oh man, the series is definitely Silent Hill. Right now, my favorite horror video game is Killer 7.
Okay,
It's just so weird. It's just so weird. Okay, Killer 7 came out GameCube's PlayStation 2 era originally. It just recently came out on PC again, so I finally got to play it all the way through in this glorious graphics. But you want a drug trip? That's what that game is. You are in control of 7 assassins known as the Killer 7. They're all last name Smith. None of them are actually related to each other, and they are killing these entities known as the Heaven Smile. And the Heaven Smile are flipping disturbing. Again, it's one of those David Lynch kind of things where you can tell they were inspired by David Lynch. It's a mind trip. It's so good though. Like it's a weird game because it was made in an era where on rail shooters, which hopefully I know you know what an on rail shooter is, Matt.
I do.
In the mid 90s, early 90s, there were light gun games where the game moved for you and it went in one direction. That's why it's called on rails. Well, Killer 7 is kind of like that. It's third person and you move in one direction basically. And it's trippy. Like your victims come back to talk to you, kind of trippy.
Well, that just sounds unpleasant.
Oh man, it's pleasant and unpleasant. It's really hard to explain. I have an affinity for weird games. Yes, I have a very strong affinity for weird games. But yeah, that one's wild. Although I have a long list of video games that I recommend in the horror front for people. But yeah, that one's probably my favorite right now.
Well, yeah, what are some of your recommendations too? I think that might be interesting to hear.
Current games that are easy to acquire right now. Alan Wake is a must. If you are in any means a fan of Stephen King, you will probably love that game because it's basically the main character basically is a Stephen King kind of character. Like he's a writer and he goes to this little backwater town to try to get over writer's block, and this thing in the lake decides that it wants to use him to come back to life and kidnaps his wife and slowly takes over the townspeople, and it's really well written. Control is another one I recommend. That one just came out, and again, that's that SCP / X-Files kind of game. Condemned is definitely a game I recommend. That one's a close runner-up to Killer 7 for me. That one, you're an FBI agent and it's got some of the most adaptive AI that I've ever come across in a video game. And by the end of it, it has gone completely. Can I use profanity on his show? I've been being good right now. I just need to know before I keep going.
Trying to rein it in.
All right. Bat crazy. There we go. Bat bleep crazy. Because that yeah. I'm just making sure before I slip up. That's basically why I asked. I definitely I recommend the Silent Hill games with a caveat. If you can find the original voice acting for them, play them. Because from what I understand, the remasters of those weren't good.
Oh, I hadn't even realized that they'd been remastered.
Yeah, there was a crap storm around that. Konami, being the omnipotent gods that they decided they are, has decided to remove themselves from video games except for making pachinko machines and apparently slot machines, because that's what the latest Silent Hill video game is. A slot machine. They didn't want to pay the voice actors to reuse their voices, so they hired American actors and redid all of the voice acting for the remaster. Because, the voice actors, being intelligent people, were like, yeah, no, we're not going to give up our rights to our voices. Because you shouldn't do that, kids. Get paid for what you're worth.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, and you mentioned something, and I think this is definitely something worth exploring, because, again, I don't know the basic demographic of people that are listening to this show, but we've mostly on the show talked about books and films and a few other media here and there, but it's mostly books and films. And I think it's important to mention like the writing side of video games, that it's not just the programming of and the graphics and everything. A good video game is going to have its own good story to it.
Oh yeah, especially for horror. Horror is heavily reliant, especially horror video games. Some exceptions apply, like Five Nights at Freddy again. That game does not have a ton of in-game writing. Most of this lore that has come out from that has been in outside sources like the website, things like the books, which I've heard are terrible. And tidbits that the creator's been putting out, as well as like the community coming together and putting the story together to figure out what's happening. So that's kind of an anomaly. Like it's an outlier. There aren't a whole lot of games that work like that. And then you have games like Silent Hill that are so intricate in their lore. Like you pretty much have to find all of the notes and things to really understand how deep the sound goes.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to underestimate the amount of work that goes into something like that. Well, like you said, you've got all these hidden notes and clues and everything else that you have to piece together yourself. So it's, aside from just getting the pants scared off you, you've got the detective side too, if you really get into it and want to unravel the full lore side of everything.
Oh, and another thing that your normal audience will probably find a little more interesting, because it is more the literary side of things here. Visual novels are a thing, and they are awesome, especially in the horror variety. I am working my way through one called The Letter. That is an indie title, and it what a visual novel is literally a visual novel. Like there are sometimes static images, sometimes slightly animated things on screen, but you are playing a book. Sometimes, like, the good ones have choices. Some of them literally are just a book and you're reading it, or it's reading itself to you. But I'm a jaded horror head. There ain't much that creeps me out. That game has given me some moments where it's unnerving, and you wouldn't expect it to be unnerving.
Which one, Silent Hill?
No, The Letter.
Oh, The Letter. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, Silent Hill's mess with me too.
I'm definitely gonna have to look into The Letter. I'm curious now with this idea of a visual novel. That's new to me. I'm not super familiar with it.
I have been playing it some, so you know where you can find videos of
it. Indeed.
Call of Cthulhu is actually an official video game, like by Chaosium. Like Chaosium licensed this game. It is, who made that? I think it was Frogware that made that game.
Okay.
And it's holds up pretty well. It's got a really interesting sanity system. There are a lot of Cthulhu video games. Surprisingly, most of them are good, which can't be said for all the movies that come out for Cthulhu.
It is rare to have the good ones, unfortunately.
Like they date back. I haven't played a lot of the old ones, but I have played Call of Cthulhu is the name of the game, not Call of Cthulhu's Dark Corners of the Earth, which is good but broken. And when I say broken, I mean it's a glitchy mess, but it's really good. That one particularly follows the Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth follows the story of Shadows over Innsmouth, pretty much to a T. It's actually really interesting. The Call of Cthulhu video game that just came out is kind of like you're playing an investigator in the tabletop game, and it works pretty much the same. You're finding clues, you're figuring out what's happening, and just like the tabletop game, the more you know, the crazier he gets.
Well, yeah, I think it's worth explaining, like the tabletop game, because I don't know how many of the listeners are going to be familiar with it, but I mean, it's essentially a role playing a la Dungeons and Dragons, but with its own sort of sanity system, which I love. I've always loved this.
The sanity system is what drew me to it. There is a D20 version of Call of Cthulhu. I've never played it. I think it's kind of hard to find. It's pretty much defunct now, as far as I know. I won't really explain the dice things because that's kind of like Greek to people that don't play tabletop games. But yeah, the whole purpose. Well, it depends on who's running it too, because that's the beauty of playing tabletop is that people, your GM or your keeper of arcane lore, which is what they're calling Call of Cthulhu, they set the table, so they let you know what you can and can't do. So, like, there's another version of Call of Cthulhu that my tabletop group plays that is Pulp Cthulhu, which is more like the noir kind of thing. Like, it's more action oriented, and you're less likely to die in one go. You have more hit points. You're notoriously squishy in Call of Cthulhu, but that's with good reason, because it's based heavily on Lovecraft's writings, and people don't tend to survive that stuff. Either you go crazy or you die. It's just pretty much a one-way street to the end. Once you know what's happening.
Those are pretty much the two general outcomes in Lovecraft.
yeah, it sticks pretty true to that. It is a little bit more influenced by Derleth stuff in some aspects, but it tries to stay pretty true to it. I'm trying to think of like what's the best thing to describe about it. It's like basically your goals are investigation, which means you're going to be reading a lot of supplements, which is cool for you as a character because it helps you get into the scenario better. And the fun bit is going crazy, because when you go crazy, a lot of really bad things can happen to you and your party, because you can kill your party if you go crazy enough. I have a tendency to roll to eat strange things when I get insane. That never ends well for me. I try to eat the monster usually too. My GMs just don't like me. It's nothing like, oh, I failed that sanity roll. Okay, well, how bad did you fail it? Oh, well, I lost 20% of my sanity on that go. Okay, well, roll another dice. Oh, that's a 9. I know what that is. That's strange desires to eat things. Yeah, and there's that juicy tentacle right in front of you.
Well, and I think that's something that's worth mentioning, that I've always found fun about like tabletop role-playing games is the collaborative story aspect of it. Like, no matter how well crafted the GM has got their campaign set up.
Oh, your players are kind of screw it up.
Yeah, the players will screw it up, and it will sometimes happen. Like, you will get amazing results from it because it really does become this collaborative storytelling along with pure chance from dice. So,
oh yeah, my personal favorites are when things go horribly, horribly wrong when the GM is trying not to kill you. That's when your dice are just like, okay, so in Call of Cthulhu you use D100s, which is a 1 is a critical success, 100 is a critical failure. And there's nothing like, all I need you to do is just walk through this room and somebody see the thing is in here, everybody fails a roll. And then you see the thing and everybody goes crazy, and like half your crew rolls poorly on their their sanity rolls, and at least 2 of them go crazy, and 1 of them rolls homicidal rage. I got taken by Shagnafan in one group, and I was a sharpshooter, like I was a glass cannon, and what that is basically somebody with a lot of firepower but really fragile. And I was my character used a rifle, and I was possessed by Shagnafan. And Shagnafan wanted a scroll back that we had gotten, and her boyfriend had the scroll, and she almost killed him. He was lucky she was holding a handgun instead of a rifle, because she would have took his head off. And that happened at least 3 times in that campaign where she almost killed people because she got possessed.
Well, so I have to ask too, like we're talking about the storytelling side of things, but on the horror side of things, playing Call of Cthulhu, like the tabletop game, does it have, have you ever had a session that like got under your skin or freaked you out? Or
that relies mostly on your GM, how well they do at describing what's happening to you. Because one of the downsides to playing Call of Cthulhu is that most of us that play Call of Cthulhu, we know the lore. So it's really hard not to metagame it, because you still have to play in character. That's another fun / hard thing to do with tabletop role play. Metagaming is a no-no. And what metagaming means is that if you, the player, have knowledge that your character does not have, you cannot let that character have that knowledge, because they don't. You have to act like they don't know that stuff. So, like, you'll go into a scenario and you're getting hints dropped as to what the thing is, and you're the player going, oh snap, it's a star vampire, but your character doesn't know that, so you can't act in a manner that would save you from the star vampire unless your character finds that out. And then there are other times where you just there'll be really screwed up things. There's one we were playing Masters of Nyarlathotep, and I won't describe the scenario in great detail. I'll just describe this one thing. There's a cult orgy happening. I don't know what there is about orgies in my storytelling right now, but there's a cult orgy happening under this store, and it's really disturbing because there's this snake thing. Like, I can't really describe it because it's that's one of the things in Lovecraft that's undescribable. It's like it drove a lot of us insane when we actually saw it, and it's that whole Call of Cthulhu scenario where they're going through the swamps and then they see this mass of people having the ceremony with these sacrificial people dead on pikes and stuff. And just that whole mental image of walking into that, and it's just like 4 of you against like 100 people. Or having a teammate that you've gotten really comfortable with dying in a horrible way. One of my characters got Evil Deaded, and by what I mean by Evil Dead is, the tree scene with the tree rape. Yeah, that happened to one of my characters. I ran into a dark young, and she didn't make it.
Ooh.
She did not make it. That involved a skinless person too. That one was rough. That was one of the ones that kind of got under my skin a little bit. That particular GM, though, he's really good at being skeevy when he describes things, so it already makes your skin crawl a little bit, no matter what he says. One time there was a sawhorse mission mentioned, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay, then.
Bringing it back to the video game side of things, one of the things that the video games have been doing with Lovecraft is that several of them have really good sanity systems. As in, they mess with you, the gamer, not just the character. One of the best examples I've ever seen of this in a video game is a game that came out on GameCube called Eternal Darkness, and that's one of the best Lovecraftian games ever made. And as you would lose sanity, it would mess with your character, but it would also do stuff to you playing it. Like when you go crazy from seeing the creatures in the game, it would act like it was changing the channel, or it would make the volume go lower. And like, this was on like old TVs, so it looked real when we were doing it then. Like, it wouldn't really work now, but yeah, stuff like that. It's just like, holy crap, what did I sit on the remote? And then your character screams, the screen goes black, and then it goes back to your character. Like, oh, that's messed up.
Was this the game that would also make it look like it wouldn't let you save as you went?
Yeah, it would do that. stuff like that, or it would say your save got corrupted and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. That's just mean.
It is mean. That it I can't tell you the kind of panic that induces. Like, any gamer understands that panic, especially in a game where you have to save. It's like you've been playing for like 2 hours and you're just like, I gotta get to a save spot, and then that happens. You're just like, no, did my game die? Is my console dying? And then your character's just like, oh, it's not a cool game. That's not cool. That's not cool.
Well, it looks like we're getting close to kind of our self-imposed time limit here. So, like, what are your kind of like main points or final thoughts or anything you'd like to kind of wrap up with regarding horror?
You know, mostly what I have to say about horror is encourage your kids to get into it if they're showing any kind of desire to get into it. I was lucky enough that while my mother wasn't happy I liked horror, she was a horror head when she was younger too, so she kind of got it. And I didn't have to feel weird about, well, I kind of did. She still kind of called me a Satan worshiper. But encourage what your kids are into. That's really what I'm trying to say here.
But
that's the main key.
You mean we shouldn't be shunning and making them feel ashamed?
Yes, don't shun.
Because I've been doing it wrong then, apparently.
No, it depends on what we're shunning them for.
No.
If it's polo shirts, we shun them.
Well,
polo shirts and khakis we shun. No, I'm kidding.
Well, cool. Well, so is there anything in particular that you would like to plug? I know that you have a definite online presence, and you've got a lot of different things going on. Might I say, fantastic artist, by the way.
No, thank you.
Well, your commissioned art that I commissioned from you has been my Facebook profile picture for the last 7 years, with very rare exceptions. Do I change it and then change it back? So
yeah, I have to admit that I'm very happy that you asked me to draw that. I've never thought that anybody would ask me to draw Santa having a death match with a hobo on a shark in space.
Yep. And it came out better than I had ever imagined. But seriously, is there anything that you'd like to plug for yourself, like for any of your endeavors?
Yeah, I stream pretty much whenever I can on Twitch. You can find me at Nekko the Odd, Nekko the Odd, one word, on Twitch. I also am trying to start the comic back. I do a webcomic. It is Red Velvet Requiem. You can find it on The Duck. I think that's the name of the site. Now let me be sure. Let me pull it up real quick. God, you swear I was prepared for this, right? Yeah, theduckwebcomics.com/Red Velvet Requiem with underscores between the words, cause spaces. And Tapastic, I'm also there too. And that is a Lovecraftian comic that I've been working on for years.
Years and years. I'll be honest, I have not kept up with it. I know
That's
you haven't.
Okay, I
haven't
either.
But I was following along for a long time when you started out, and it was, oh man, I'm very insanely jealous that you can draw in ways that I would like to be able to. So
if it makes you feel any better, I wish I could draw in better ways.
Well, that's every artist. We all want to write better or draw better, or all of us artists are harsh on ourselves, but truly gifted artist. So in my opinion, at least.
Well, I thank you. Also, you can find me on Twitter, same name as the Twitch, Nekko the Odd. You probably see my screen name as the Pimptrix. That's your fault, man.
Well, it is one of the best nicknames I've ever given out, I guess. So.
It is. I enjoy that name. If I had not gone with Nekko the Odd, it was going to be the Pimptrix.
This is just a quick reminder that your co-hosts Lisa and Mel wrote a book. From gothic ghost stories to psychological horror to science fiction, women have been the primary architects of dark speculative literature of all sorts. So satisfy your craving for extraordinary authors and exceptional fiction. Meet the women writers who defied convention to craft some of literature's strangest tales in a new nonfiction book, Monster She Wrote. The book is out now, and you can order now by going to the Quirk Books website or through any major book retailer. And we would love to hear from you. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. If you'd like to contact us by email, and we love getting emails, please send us an email at nofearcast@gmail.com. If you like what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to exclusive content. So every other week when we don't have a main episode, we have mini episodes on Patreon for our $5 a month patrons. Or you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, which is entirely free. And through Apple Podcasts algorithms, it helps other listeners find us. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.